You sit silently at the bus stop, waiting for the rain to end, waiting for your parents to come and pick you up from school. You have a book in your lap, and your head is down reading it silently, listening to the pitter-patter of the rain outside. When suddenly, you feel a splash at the top of your head. You think it's a drop of rain. You look up, and you see... Grab a blanket, turn off your lights for true scary ghost stories that happened in the rain.
Invisible Rain. This took place about 6 years ago when I lived with my mom and stepfather. We stayed in a 2-story house and my bedroom was downstairs, while the other bedrooms, living room, and kitchen were all upstairs. The backyard bordered a canyon, and there were lots of trees and brush. When this particular incident took place, it was about 10 p.m. on a Friday night, and 2 friends and I were in my bedroom ready to go out to a club. We had not been drinking or anything of the such. My parents had already gone to bed, but I heard voices upstairs as we were getting ready to leave, so I went to check. My stepfather was comforting my mother and she looked terrified. They said that she woke up with the worst feeling of dread and sadness that she'd ever felt, as if something terrible had or was about to happen. My mother has never been one to make things up, and she could not have faked the horrible look in her eyes. We decided to look out back when my mother said she felt like something or someone was there. By this time, my friends had come up to see what was going on. We got a flashlight and one of those big spotlight flashlights and scanned the backyard for any sign of animals, people, or anything else. We did this from behind the closed sliding glass doors since we didn't really know what was out there. We didn't see anything and it was clear. So my friends and I went out to the back porch and looked some more. I had the large spotlight, and I looked through the bushes and the porch itself, and even straight up to the sky, thinking I might see birds or something like that. Nothing. Finally, we concurred that there was nothing there, and then it started drizzling rain. I remember saying that figures, but then it never occurred to me that it was a clear night. So I looked up at the sky again, but did not see any drops. I started to get nervous and used the spotlight to look up, but there was no rain coming down. Yet I felt pattering on my face and arms. I looked very carefully, but could only feel the rain. I said to my friend, "Do you see that?" Never mentioning the rain, and he looked for a few seconds. Then his eyes got real big and he said, "There's no rain." He clearly felt it too. We ran inside the house immediately and locked the door. We both confirmed that we'd experienced the same thing, and decided to not investigate any further outside. We could never find any explanation for the occurrences, as there weren't any sprinklers within reach of where we were at. The sky was clear, and even if there were, we couldn't see the drops with the flashlights. Man in the Rain. Recently, I read a story on the site that brought back a memory of events that took place over one summer. I'm still quite perplexed and am hoping that maybe someone else may be able to shed some light on this. These events took place over the summer of 1998 while I lived in Boston. This particular summer was very rainy and there was quite a bit of flooding. The first experience happened one Saturday night while out with friends. We were traveling west along the Mass Pike during a downpour. I was seated in the back seat when suddenly I saw that the lights from the passing cars had illuminated what appeared to be a man walking on the side of the road. From what I could see, he was an older man and balding. He appeared to be in one of those wife-beater t-shirts and light-colored pants. He was also carrying something. This is the best I can describe him. given that the windows were blurry and raindrops. I mentioned to my friends that this was such a horrible night to get stuck on the side of the road. Interestingly enough, my friends didn't see that man. I kept waiting to see a car stalled with its hazard lights on, but we didn't pass anything. I had forgotten about this incident until another night. I was driving by myself during a rainstorm on the same highway. What do I happen to catch out of my eye? The same darn man in the same clothes, walking up the side of the highway. There was no broken down car on the road either. There was a part of me that was tempted to go back and see if I could find the man, but there was another part of me that really had a bad feeling about this. This was an experience that would go on to repeat itself several more times throughout that summer. This didn't just happen on the Mass Pike either. I had it happen while traveling on 495 and also on Route 2. It did not seem to matter if I had friends with me or not. I seemed to be the only person that saw this man, and he only appeared when it was raining. I don't understand why this was happening. He had no discernible features other than what I described above. There were no deaths in my family or any other bad experiences that year. I had started to think that it was a warning of some sort, but I can't think of what it might have been. And to this day, I still have no idea what the purpose of this was, and why I was the only person that was seeing him. The Rain Lady. I will not claim to be a sensitive or even someone who is in touch with the paranormal world, but since young, I have this random ability to sense and sometimes see friends or entities from the other world. What I meant by random was, I can sense and see some days, and totally oblivious some other days. Before suddenly I can sense them again, it comes and goes like that. Enough with the background, I guess. One of my most mind-boggling experiences happened when I was around 20 years old. I chose to take a break for a year to work and earn money for university expenses that time, so I got this job in a boys' school in my hometown as a tutor for computer-assisted learning. This was almost 7 years back. The school itself is one of the oldest schools in my state. The computer lab I worked in was on the first floor, and furthest down from the other classes. It has this almost depressing vibe with the dim lighting, peeling paint, and old-looking windows. I never feel a sense of dread when I stepped in, as I usually will if I feel the place is haunted. All went well during the first few months, until the monsoon season rolled in. The first heavy rain and thunderstorm, I was alone in the lab. I sensed a presence in the room with me. Nothing much, just the hair on my neck stood up. I ignored it. As the days pass, especially on rainy days, this presence makes itself known even more. It escalates from a feeling of another person in the room with me to faint shadows at the corner of the room, until one day, I saw the full form of this entity, an old lady, wearing rags, drenched from head to toe, long hair standing at furthest corner of the room. I was freaked when I saw her that clearly. I pretended I needed to go to the toilet and left the room. Only went in after the rain stopped. Thank God I have no class at that slot. I saw her again a few times, during heavy rain, but not on normal days. I wonder why. Motorcycle ride in the rain. It was the middle of August, and the harsh wind blew hot and humid, kicking up a storm for the evening hours. Off to the north, the black clouds had started to brew and roll. It was about 6:30 p.m., and my date was late. He would not tell me where he planned to take me. It was a surprise. Now, being 30 minutes late, I began to wonder what could possibly be going on, if I would be going anywhere. I walked out onto the front porch and could almost smell the rain coming. It began to grow darker. I decided that if he arrived, he would just stay at my house until the storm passed. I then started to worry that he may be riding his motorcycle. Motorcycles and thunderstorms do not mix. He knew I despised motorcycles. But, well, hopefully, he would be in his truck. As the dreaded motorcycle came around the corner, the rain began to spit big fat drops. He got off the bike, and it indicated we needed to hurry up. I told him I was not going, it was raining. I was not getting on the bike, and I wouldn't even if it was not raining. After he became increasingly angry with me and refused to stay at my house until the storm passed, he got onto the motorcycle and started off into the downpour. I looked up and all I could see was flashing red and blue lights, such as those coming off an ambulance vehicle. I watched for a few minutes, thinking there must have been an accident right in front of the house. I could hear screams of agony, sounding as if they were coming from a few feet in front of me. No one was there. I turned around and grabbed my iced tea I had brought onto the porch with me. As I turned back, the lights were all gone. There were no evidence of an accident either. I shook my head and turned to go into the house. As I turned, I could hear the unmistakable roar of his motorcycle starting, and then screeching tires. I rolled around and nothing was there. I turned back around after a few moments and decided I would sit on the porch for a while. Surely the heat had gotten to me because I was seeing and hearing things. About 20 minutes later, my mom called me at the screen door telling me I had a call. I asked who it was, as my mom was familiar with all of my friends. She stated she didn't recognize the voice. I went in and answered the phone. The voice on the other end of the line clarified my name and asked how I was related to Mark, my would-be date from earlier. I told him I was not related, that we had been dating for a few weeks. I was then informed that he had my name and phone number in his back pocket, so I was the first person they called. Mark had been in an accident on his motorcycle. The roads were wet and slick. He skidded out of control and came to a rest on a couple of those sand barrels that are used for street barriers. As the accident was being described to me by phone, I looked up and saw the flashing red and blue lights again. I heard the screech of tires. I closed my eyes tightly and said a silent prayer. As I opened my eyes, again the lights and screeching sounds were gone. I was told to contact his parents and come to the hospital. They would not release his condition to me over the phone. I told my mom. She drove me over to his parents' home and I told them of the call. We all went to the hospital together. By the time we arrived at the hospital, Mark's left leg had been put into a cast all the way to his hip. His scrapes and cuts had been cleaned on his arms and face, and he was arguing that he did not need to have the cervical collar on. Mark ended up staying in the hospital overnight for observation, but he eventually recovered completely. We did not continue to date after that night because he stated I jinxed him. About 3 years later, he had another accident on a motorcycle, which ended up breaking his back and his pelvis, causing him to give up motorcycles for good. The Graveyard Boy. About 3 years ago, I was visiting my great-uncle's grave. I was leaving him his favorite flowers and an American flag. I stood there for a while, talking to his tombstone, hoping he would know I was still visiting. I had only met him once, but I admired him and would not forget him. A lot of people think he died in war. He didn't. Only of natural causes. It began to rain. I loved the rain, but still wanted a jacket, since I was wearing a thin shirt. After about 2 minutes, my shoulders were becoming visible through the shirt, suddenly feeling dry and warm. I look up to see a boy smiling at me. He told me I would catch cold if I stood in the rain like that, so I accepted his gesture. After I had finished my visit, we walked back to the gate together. He offered to walk me back to my grandparents since he was afraid I would be hurt if I were walking alone. After an hour of walking, my mom drove up near us and motioned me to the car. She said she was about to come and get me. I tried to give the boy his jacket back. He rejected me, waved goodbye, and walked off. I entered the car and drove home with my mom. The next day, I was cleaning my clothes when I came across his jacket. I decided to wash it and return it to him. I checked the pockets of the jacket and found an address written on it. After washing it, I headed to the street that was on the paper, only a one-lane road and one house. I knocked on the door. After a few seconds, a woman opened the door. I smiled and told her that her son had loaned me his jacket last night and that I wanted to give it back to him. She broke out in tears and looked down at me, enraged. She scolded at me and thought I was mocking her. I told her I didn't know what she meant. She burst out crying even harder. She looked at me this time with happiness. I was shocked at what she told me next. She said, her son died a year ago yesterday, and he couldn't possibly have given me his jacket. But what she said after that was even weirder. It was the jacket he wore the night he died. I ended up keeping the jacket and going back home to Cali. It's now my favorite jacket. Occasionally, I see the boy. He follows me around when I'm in Indiana. I've also gotten into more trouble after that, more near-death experiences, and even when I was flying back to Indiana last week, our plane almost crashed. We were in Indiana Air at the time, and I was asleep when turbulence happened. I woke up and next to me in the empty seat was the boy, his hand on mine. After a minute or so, we regained altitude and everything was okay. After regaining altitude, though, he was gone. That night, when I was using my mom's laptop in the basement while I watched my baby cousin, he appeared. He smiled and kissed my forehead and left again. He always appears when I'm in Indiana and places a hand on mine before disappearing. So tell me, do you think this ghost is just following me or something? P.S. I will keep you posted on what happens in the future.